right. Well, Paul, this is your first decode on your first appearance on Weekend, so I'm super excited to hear what you've got.
All right. So, in this moment of racial reckoning, Black Lives Matter protests, and people trying to make sense of racial inequality in this country, something is rearing its ugly head again. And, sometimes in conversations, my leftist ears will perk up when I hear people say that, reforms on race are meaningless without economic empowerment. But soon I realize what people mean by that. They're not talking about working people running the economy for their benefit. They're talking about Black capitalism. More Black business owners, more Black-owned businesses, more Black people spending their money at Black-owned businesses. Black capitalism permeates our culture. Black people are constantly told by other wealthy Black stars that if only we learn how to invest right, we can overcome the structural barriers of poverty. After all, if Nas figured it out, you can too.
One thing that should have been really strong on our minds was business. This is America. This is capitalism at its finest. We're doing everything besides legal business. We're not caring too much about if America's saying stop complaining, get off your ass, Black guys, and make something yourself. Then it's like, for me, I'm like, okay, then let's start teaching the little dudes and little women on the block business, money management, and entrepreneurship. And we don't have any more time to waste. There's no more time to play around. We have to literally go back on the block with a plan, come down there and show them business modules and show them how they can get into computer programming, real estate, get into engineering, get into all the things that are making a lot of money, all the things that are making this country better. We can do it. It just needs to be cool. It needs to feel like it's something cool. It needs to feel like, all right, we tried this. Watch the movie Scarface. You know how that's going to end, right?
So that's all we need to do. We just need to make it cool. If we make business cool, all Black youth can be computer programmers and real estate developers. We're told that these deep inequalities don't need public policy to address. We can just use consumerism, especially since the summer of protests, Black and white liberals are increasingly focusing on buying Black.
Following a summer full of national headlines around George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Black Lives Matter, and the coronavirus, a new movement emerged called Buy Black, highlighting Black-owned businesses and giving them much-needed support. According to the latest statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau's annual business survey, minorities own an estimated 1 million businesses in the U.S. Of those, just 12% were Black-owned. And according to Yelp, mentions of Black-owned in reviews are up 617% this summer compared to last.
Consumers are eager to seek out, find, and support Black-owned businesses.
Tara Lewis is a Yelp trends expert.
In fact, just this past summer, on Yelp, we noticed a 6,520% increase in searches for Black-owned businesses.
Looking at those numbers, what does that tell you?
It tells you that people are really interested in putting their dollars where their values are and what they care about the most. If they have a choice to spend at multiple different places, and right now that they really want to support the Black community, supporting Black-owned businesses with your dollars is a great way to do that.
So in the 1950s, we were told that what's good for General Motors is good for America. And Black capitalism tells us that what is good for one Black business owner is good for all Black people. Somehow, the majority of Black working class people benefit when some Black individuals and their companies get rich. If you can't tell from the tone of my voice, I think this is a fatally flawed idea. But this is not a new idea. Booker T. Washington in the late 19th century told Black people to stop pressing for political solutions and align your interests with the business elite. Marcus Garvey galvanized millions of Black people around the idea that the establishment of Black businesses would lead to Black independence and glory. Some of the most successful Black businesses were owned by the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm X also extolled the virtues of Black capitalism.
So our people not only have to be re-educated to the importance of supporting Black business, but the Black man himself has to be made aware of the importance of going into business. And once you and I go into business, we own and operate at least the businesses in our community. What we will be doing is developing a situation wherein we will actually be able to create employment for the people in the community. And once you can create some employment in the community where you live, it will eliminate the necessity of you and me having to act ignorantly and disgracefully, boycotting and picketing some cracker someplace else, trying to beg him for a job. Anytime you have to rely upon your enemy for a job, you're in bad shape.
Later in the 20th century, it was actually Richard Nixon, believe it or not, that revived the legitimacy of Black capitalism. In 1968, take a look at this advertisement he placed in the Black cultural magazine, Jet Magazine. He wrote, "A vote for Richard Nixon for president is a vote for a man who wants Homer to have the chance to own his own business." Richard Nixon believed strongly in Black capitalism because Black capitalism is Black power in the best sense of the word. It's the key to the Black man's fight for equality, for a piece of the action. And it was under Nixon that the Small Business Administration first started targeting Black entrepreneurs for federal assistance. You may be laughing, but this cynical maneuver brought Nixon some unlikely support from prominent Black figures. People like James Brown, the NFL star and supposed militant Jim Brown, and Sammy Davis Jr. all endorsed Nixon in 1972. In fact, at an event during his re-election campaign, Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz, was in attendance of all people. But there was another Nixon supporter who attempted one of the biggest experiments in Black capitalism, and that was Floyd McKissick. McKissick was a leader of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, which coordinated some of the most iconic civil disobedience actions of the civil rights movement, like the Freedom Rides. McKissick left CORE in the late 1960s, and he started McKissick Enterprises and pursued the building of Soul City. Soul City was supposed to be a town built by Black wealth and for Black people.
Black people want to have the choice to live where they want to.
A Negro leader today announced plans for creation of a Black-built, Black-owned town to be called Soul City in North Carolina.
In this new town, persons will be able to control their own destinies.
Seeing this whole thing being transformed was the most liberating thing I've ever experienced in my lifetime.
Affordable housing, people were going to get jobs. That's what made sense back then. We thought we had a very good plan in place. And the question then was how we could execute any of it. Even as President Nixon on down, we were trying to make a case that they were very supportive. On the ground, we didn't have the dollars.
Soul City failed because even this capitalist project needed massive investments from the federal government to succeed, and that investment wasn't there. Ironically, in order to make this symbol of Black independence work, McKissick had to beg Nixon and other powerful white men for the money to make it possible. But even if the investment was there, it would fail to improve the lives of a substantial number of Black working people. Why should we assume that the profits of McKissick would trickle down to other Black people? Trump has used the same Nixon playbook when he signed an executive order to establish opportunity zones, or low-tax areas to incentivize investment in communities that have been abandoned for decades. Let's hear what Ben Carson had to say about these opportunity zones.
Mr. Secretary, let's get right at it. If I'm a private sector investor, I've got private money, and I'm going into one of these opportunity zones, what do I get? What do you do for me?
Well, you know, this is the wonderful thing. In the past, there you got nothing, and that's why these areas have been neglected economically. But now you can take your unrealized capital gains and you can invest them into one of the opportunity funds long term. If you're willing to leave it in there for 5 years, you get a 10% decrement on the taxes that you would owe on that capital gains. Leave it in an extra 2 years, you get another 5%. But if you want to go the long term and leave it in for 10 years, you have to pay no capital gains on the increase from the investment.
So it's a capital gains tax break for outside private investors who may want to get they've made some money in the market or wherever, they've made a capital gain, put some of that money into these enterprise zones, and they get a capital gains tax break. Is that roughly what's happening here?
That's exactly right. It's a win-win situation. Yeah. You know, they get a tax break, and we finally get the kind of investment that we need in the areas that have been economically neglected. And then we couple that with some of the many other programs that we have, like the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration, which create public-private partnerships and really takes over the public housing stock and converts it into something that is really nice. And those and the new market tax credits and all of these things together give us a possibility of doing something that has not been done before.
Real inspiring plan there. So let me get this straight. These businesses that may or may not pay a living wage get a tax break, and the communities they're in don't get to reap the benefits of tax revenue that would go to stuff like, I don't know, schools, infrastructure, public services. And notice how he seems to put emphasis on saying this has not been done before, but it has been. Democrats and Republicans have repackaged and resold various iterations of Nixon's black capitalism for decades. Whether it's called black capitalism, opportunity zones, or whatever else they'll call it in the future, it's built on a false premise. The idea that what is good for business is good for black people, when our entire history has proven this idea to be false. We also need to get rid of the fantasy that small businesses are somehow inherently progressive. Now, I certainly don't put small businesses in the same category as corporate giants like Amazon, and many small businesses are run by genuinely good people, but often they are structurally incapable of providing the things that improve working people's lives. Sometimes they really can't pay a living wage or provide good health benefits. And there's just no way that the majority of people of any race are going to become business owners. Most will be working for someone else. The solution is not to double down on creating more small businesses. It's to build a labor movement and a strong welfare state. The majority of black people have only made significant progress when there has been strong federal policies to redistribute wealth and power, expansions of the public sector, and the growth of the trade union movement. Let's look at some of the numbers on this. When it comes to the public sector, 20% of black workers are employed in the public sector, which means they are disproportionately more likely to be in public employment. Around a third of these public sector jobs are unionized, so these are jobs that are more likely to offer stability, a living wage, and strong benefits. On the whole, black workers in the public sector make almost 25% more in wages than their counterparts in the private sector. Public sector jobs have been and still are a critical lifeline for wealth stability among black communities. In fact, the public sector has been the single greatest factor mitigating black poverty, and that's an empirical fact. And speaking in broad terms, there have been 3 historical periods when black people have made substantial progress economically and in the realm of civil rights. The first being Reconstruction, when protection was granted by the federal government to try to enforce basic civil rights. Important public social programs were established in the South, and even some federal employment was opened up to black people. And if you're interested to hear more on Reconstruction, we have a great guest for you. But the second period was the era of the New Deal and World War II, where black workers got a deeper foothold and expanded public employment, and over 1 million black workers joined the mostly private sector trade union movement. And the third period was, of course, during the 1960s, with civil rights and voting rights enshrined into law, which took vigorous action from the federal government. And again, black people took advantage of a huge expansion of public employment in the 60s to get relatively secure and well-paid jobs. Notice how during these periods, the establishment of businesses, whether black-owned or not, did not play a significant role in actually advancing the interests of the majority of black people. We don't have to go to black capitalism for inspiration on how we address the crisis that so many black people are facing. There was another model put forward in the 60s, and that was the Freedom Budget, developed by civil rights strategist Bayard Rustin and union leader A. Philip Randolph. The program of the Freedom Budget represented a complete redistribution of wealth and power in our society. It called for national health insurance, full employment, the elimination of slums with high-quality affordable housing, raising the minimum wage, and more. This program would have, of course, benefited all working people, but we should always be clear that black people are disproportionately working class people, more so than whites. This is the model that should inspire us today. And let's listen a little bit to Bayard Rustin talking about the Freedom Budget.
The Freedom Budget furthermore says that when you talk about Negroes helping themselves, Negroes are prepared to help themselves. 1/4 of all the Negro poor are not unemployed. They are working at beneath minimum wages in the cotton fields of Mississippi for $3 a day, in houses as maids as $8 a week in Montgomery, Alabama. Help themselves. Now we want a $2 minimum wage so that Negro people who are working and deserve a decent wage shall have it. Now you'll say to me, but Mr. Rustin, my father owns a little store and he couldn't possibly pay $2 minimum wage. If he owns a tiny little store, you're probably right. I want to help him too. Oh, I want to help everybody. If we can subsidize Mr. Rockefeller's and Mr. Harrington's railways for billions of dollars, and if we can give farmers billions of dollars because they don't plant, or because they plant here, or because they burn this crop and save this one, then I am for a $2 minimum wage in which those employers who cannot afford truly to pay it receive subsidies from the government in order to pay it. I am not for brutalizing the poor small businessman. I am for helping the worker who is exploited. And if to do that, we have to help the small businessman, amen.
So let me be clear here, because I know I might be sounding a little bit harsh. Would it be terrible to have more Black-owned small businesses? No. If you want to go out and support Black-owned businesses, fine. But let's not pretend this is going to really improve the conditions most Black people face. Only by expanding the public sector, expanding high-quality public employment, and reviving the trade union movement can we do that. And then I really like how Barry Rustin, he brought up the thing about, we can subsidize small business owners to pay a living wage. I mean, we can do this in a way that actually won't really hurt the majority of small business owners who, again, I want to be clear, I'm not putting them in the same category as Amazon, but having a million more small business owners is not really going to get at the problem here. And that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you. And I like that you juxtapose the rhetoric that we've heard from, by the way, that find from the Nixon ad, like incredible. But how that rhetoric is used to kind of push this notion of Black capitalism, something that they're not even being genuine or sincere about. You juxtapose that with the public jobs. And you had a great discussion about the importance of the post office for the Black community. Right. And everyone should check out that talk. I learned a lot listening to that. And it's true. I mean, it's just demonstrably true. The main thesis that you just presented, you have historical, context to provide evidence of that. But I also wish that you heard more, the argument about subsidizing small businesses. Whenever we have these incredibly annoying debates about increasing the minimum wage today, you don't hear that argument being made, right? Like no one's proposing that anymore. And so like, I remember having this debate with a close friend of mine who was a small business owner, and he was being real with me. He was just saying like, I can't afford to pay $15 an hour to my employees. Like we would shut down. And that forced me to like really look for different solutions. And that was the solution that made the most sense. Right. But again, I agree overall, a federal jobs guarantee is so critical to uplifting people in this economy, and I think that oftentimes when you hear conversations about a federal jobs guarantee, that component regarding race and how people of color would benefit from it is kind of left out. I don't know if it's done intentionally, but a federal jobs guarantee would do a lot for this country. And I think it's important to have it tied to something like the Green New Deal or environmental policy where we can actually kill two birds with one stone, right? Develop renewable energy and at the same time provide well-paying jobs in the country. So I love your decode. It's so good.